This is going to be the first video of some very different videos coming in a bit of a series on this channel. You asked for it when I put the poll up on the community page recently, and so we're going to do it. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. I'll let you know exactly what's going to be happening with some of these new videos. Yes, we're still going to get some of the good stuff that I normally do, sitting down, talking about principles in terms of sports science, endurance, etc. But this is just going to be a little bit of a twist on that, and hopefully something a bit more interesting for you guys to follow along and see some progress with as well. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to the channel. Nick here, making sports science simple as always. And as I said in the introduction, a little bit of a different thing we're going to be doing with some of these videos. Yes, we are still going to keep all the good stuff that you're used to. So we're still going to do sit down chats. We're going to put things up on the screen, talk about science and sports science in particular, endurance performance, all of that good stuff that we have been doing. That is still going to continue. So don't worry about that. But as you would have seen, there was a little bit of a twist in the introduction where I cut and I do a bit of the music and etc. And that's from clips from my recent training. And what this is basically a series that I'm going to be putting together over the next little while. And this is the first episode in that, just taking you through my training and taking you particularly through the thought processes behind my training, explaining why I'm doing it, but then showing you how I'm executing it and showing you how I'm going ultimately to be able to take you through that process as well. Because training isn't just theoretical. It's actually more practical than theoretical. We can have all the principles we like, but you have to be able to execute on that and be able to deliver those and then make some adjustments on the fly as well. Are things going well, or are things needing to be tweaked because they aren't quite going as planned? Really, where this all stems from is, if you aren't aware, on my channel, if you head over to the channel, not just the videos that come up here on YouTube, but if you click my name down below, it'll take you to my channel, and what you'll see is a tab called Community. Now, in that tab, I post a bunch of updates. I'm going to be trying to post a little bit more regularly, but I post a bunch of updates about when videos are coming, what type of videos, but I also ask lots of questions of our channel community here of what you want to see. And a recent poll I put up had a fantastic positive response. 100% of people responding wanted me to talk about the thought processes and how I build a training program and things like that. But 85% of those positive responses also wanted to see the week in, week out, more almost like a training vlog style set of videos where you can actually see me go through and do the training and analyze it and talk through what my processes are and my decision making around what types of sessions I'm doing, how does that lead up to the overall plan, and incorporate a lot of the principles we talk about on this channel already and some of those more, I guess, theoretical sides of things. How does that then translate into practice? And using myself as a case study in this circumstance, that's what we're going to aim to do. So hopefully enjoy a little bit of what's going to happen. Like I said, this is going to be a bit of a secondary thing. I'm still going to have early in the week is the plan at this stage to have that more theoretical bit of content, talking about things like endurance training, aerobic performance, different training sessions, high intensity interval training, the science side of things. And this is probably going to come more end of the week. You can expect sort of Thursday, Friday. I'm hoping fortnightly, weekly, not really sure yet. Let me know down below in the comments what you would prefer. Do you want to see weekly updates, maybe less regular, and sort of have them a little bit more comprehensive in what we're doing? Let me know what your preference is down below. At the end of each month I will be going through and bringing up Training Peaks and doing a full analysis. So as I would with any of my clients or any athletes I work with, jumping on Training Peaks, having a look at, well, what happened in week 1 of that month, what happened in week 3 or week 4, how did the session progress, are we seeing some solid improvement, what are the things I'm looking for in heart rate or pace, or what are the things I'm looking for in progression from the strength conditioning side of things as well. I'm going to take you right through my gym sessions and what I do from a lifting perspective that all ties into my endurance components and alike. So I'm going to be deep diving into that. The thing I'm going to do with that though is I'm going to keep that for our channel members only. A couple of really great people in our community who have clicked the join button down below under this video and join up as channel members to be a part of Team NJ Sports Science. And really, I want to reward you guys for signing up to that. And if you are interested, it's less than a coffee a month. So if you click that button down below, you're going to get access to these monthly updates of how I fully analyze training programs, progress them, regress them, change different sessions, what I'm looking for specifically to see that improvement or maybe see some maintenance or whatever it might be. I'm going to go deep dive into those, and they're going to be for members only. So if you do want to see that content, you are interested in it, click the join button down below. First one likely is going to be beginning of November for this first month of October. And that's where we're going to head into now, is the first part of the training that really stems with my beginning of my off season. So for those you've stuck around the channel for a little while, you know that my major sport isn't running, cycling, triathlon, as much as I talk about those sports as examples a lot, it's actually umpiring Australian rules football. And I mentioned this a couple of videos ago and put up a little clip, and I might chuck it back up on the screen because it was a bit of fun getting out there for my first AFL game, or at least half game coming off the bench earlier this year. But in terms of what I do, there's a high amount of running component. Realistically, we're on in a seasonal type format, week in, week out, basically having games and matches, and I'm going to be involved at having to be at my best from pretty much the first weekend in January 6th, I think, all the way through to potentially August and September again. It is a long season, but this really is my time now to get everything on track in terms of getting me as fit as I can, getting me as strong and robust enough to be able to handle that long season. Because it is basically like, if you think about any of the endurance athletes out there, it's like competing week in, week out. If you had a triathlon race, for example, or a 5K race, like doing parkrun every single week for 9 months of the year, but the strain is a lot higher. So looking at some of the GPS data, and a lot of the research backs this up as well in terms of investigating what we do in our capacities and understanding the load that goes through our bodies. AFLW is a slightly shorter game that I'm going to be exposed to earlier in the year, so January through to sort of March, April. They're going to be about 12 kilometers of running a game with probably about 1,500 meters, so 1.5 kilometers of high intensity running. And you can think of high intensity running basically like VO2 interval type intensity and above. It's incorporating sprinting at maximal speed, it's incorporating some acceleration in there, but also some efforts that are sort of that VO2 style, like 100% of VO2 max, 110, maybe a bit of 95. Really, we're looking at that hard effort type stuff. So basically that's sort of the shortest I'll get to. Once that's all finished, then I go into the longer stuff. The men's games are slightly longer, and that's where we get out to things like 14, 15, 16 kilometers of total distance covered in a game. And that's where the high intensity running goes from 2 to 2.5, sometimes, depending on the game. If it's a really fast up and down game, you might even tip over that 3 kilometer mark of high intensity running, which for anyone who's done 3 kilometers of high intensity running in a VO2 interval type session, you're like, yeah, this is a solid session as is. Once you incorporate that in with the other amount of running you have to do and the lower intensity stuff, also the change of direction load, the sprinting load, while we're all doing that as well, I'm trying to make decisions. I'm trying to make clear decisions and accurate decisions to make the game flow as best as possible. So I'm under fatigue, under pressure, trying to do all of this at once. It can be quite difficult. So hopefully you get a bit of an insight of how I bring some of these principles together and a bit of a different case study, but also a bit of insight in terms of what I do and get to know what I do a little bit better. So now I'm going to take you through a little bit of what is happening from my training program perspective and take you through some of those thought processes. So we'll jump across 2 training peaks where we're going to have a look at what the beginning of my off season looked like. And really, like I said before, this is last week was week 1. By the time you guys see this, it'll be the end of week 2. I'm currently halfway through. You can see today on the 13th. I've just finished my gym session earlier before actually starting to record these parts of this video. But what you can see here is a pretty sort of simple structure. There's some really key things that I want to highlight as part of this program that I think are really useful. And the point really of this off-season period, for me in particular, is 1, try to get as aerobically fit as possible. As I mentioned before, the demands of what I do in terms of umpiring are pretty high. We need to be quite aerobically fit, and then you've got to be able to recover and get ready to go for the next week, and still be able to train throughout that week. Sometimes, and it has happened, where I've had to double up in the same week as well. Like I have to go and be an emergency umpire on, say, a Saturday, but I've run on the Friday night doing a VFL game. And that actually happened this year, where that was the game I got on halfway through. I'd already done a game the night before. I ran, I think, 18 Ks or something the night before. It was a massive game, went for way too long just because of the nature of the game. But then the next day I had to go and run another sort of 8 to 10K. You got to be able to turn it around. That's where the aerobic fitness is really key. So this part of the program is all about just trying to get as aerobically fit as we can from a running and really cycling perspective as well is going to be my methodology to try and get there. So if we have a look at how I'm sort of building that out, let's look at the running first. There's some interval based stuff last week just to get me feeling like I can get the heart rate up again. I can open up the hips and start to get moving a little bit quicker than what I had been, given I'd taken a bit of time away from running. If I scroll back, you can see a bit of running here and there, but largely it was a lot of bike. Obviously, I did my MAP test, which, if you remember back a couple of weeks ago, I did the video on doing anything to sort of stay fit. Now I'm trying to get back into a bit more consistent routine of, well, what do I now need to do for my sport? I need to run, so that's got to be a clear focus. Where this is going to progress to is this week, a little bit more structured. You can see here, primarily this is going to change to a 3 run a week of 1 interval dedicated run early in the week, and then a couple of more zone 2 cruisy, build the volume, some good aerobic conditioning. And the point of that is I just want to build some Ks onto the engine at the moment. I just want to get some foundational capacities happening. Whereas I don't want to burn myself out completely by doing lots of intensity straight away. I want to gradually build that in, because that's going to be my highest risk of injury. If I jump straight back into lots of high intensity running, it's going to be my highest risk of injury. So I want to try and minimize that by building system a little bit of that early, progressively, gradually increasing how much that is. And that second run session in the week will become a more interval based session in probably 4 or 5 weeks time. But I'm going to use a bit of the bike as a bit of a compensation. So I'm going to use some of the intensity and some intervals on the bike to sort of keep up the aerobic conditioning side of things, boost everything up without having to put all the stress on the running and the impact load caused by the high intensity running as well, putting things like the hamstrings and calves under stress as well. I want to try and minimize that early on the program and avoid any complications this early. And that's where, as well, it's really, really important from a strength perspective. And the stuff I'm doing from more of a gym session, if you want to call it, is really, really, placed as a priority to build some of the capacities in the tissue. So make sure my calves and Achilles and hamstrings, quads, etc., are all strong enough to handle not only the training now, but set up a really good foundation of strength and power, so that as the training load increases, as the amount of intensity increases, I start to build in change of direction, and I start to build in high intensity and maximal speed, maximal velocity, sprinting like running, that my body's going to be able to handle it. And that's where I've got some good quality strength in the week, 2 to 3 strength sessions in the week, starting with 2, progressing to 3, and one that's a little bit more squat and front focused. And what I mean by front focus is a bit more quad. If I'm talking about lower body exercises, so squat's going to be more quad dominant. So at the moment, doing back squat, might progress that to front squat, might progress it to split squat. You'll see that sort of work as the program goes along. And then some accessory exercises for things like groins and Achilles or calf complex, hamstring strength, hamstring tendons, doing some isometric type work, all of that incorporated as well, just to make sure that, again, I'm building some good tissue capacity so that when the difficult stuff comes into play in terms of the training side of things and the running side of things, my body's going to be able to handle, minimize the damage if there is going to be any, but then also hopefully gain a bit of performance benefit out of it as well, and to set up some more power-based sessions to be able to get me a bit more sport specific in the nature of being able to express my ability to produce force and produce force quickly, because that's ultimately what we do. When we run, it's ability to absorb the force first and foremost. You impact the ground, you absorb it, but it's how well you then produce it to then propel yourself forward. And so if I can get better at those qualities in a general sense in the gym, down the track, that's going to translate to being able to repeat that over time, because I'm not going to break down injury-wise, but also being able to produce more powerful contractions, which ultimately is going to make me faster as well. So then if we have a look at what is happening from outside of that, really, then it comes down to, well, the bike is the top-up volume and keeping me moving, keeping some extra conditioning in there and getting some extra kilometers without having that running load. I mean, I could technically run 5 times a week. It's not something that necessarily works great for me, though. I tend to find I get a bit over fatigued and the body starts to break down a bit if I was to do that much. So I like to have a couple of bike sessions in, bit of variety, and it's also just something a bit different. I've been working on trying to complete as many Zwift different routes at the moment and try to tick all of them off. I'm using these really as a supplement to the running. And that's where you'll see here in this initial period of my off season, I'm actually going to be doing some bike VO2 intervals. Again, just to take the stress off doing too much high intensity running so early on. I don't have to be fully fit and ready to go until January for games, but then also I have to be able to sustain that all the way through for another sort of 8 or 9 months. So I don't want to be going all in now and trying to get as specific as possible with my high intensity in the week. I can afford to sort of put that to a side a little bit. I want to introduce some and make sure I get it right and really nail it running. But then just from a pure adaptation perspective, if I'm trying to get as aerobically fit as I can do that by being on the bike without the impact going through my legs. That's where these high intensity intervals are coming in on the bike, using my MAP from the test I did the other week to program those 2 minute on, 2 minute off, progress how many of those I do. So I'm going to start it with 5, build that up to 6, build it up to 7, and I'm working at 95 minimum percentage of my VO2 max. So it's going to be 285 watts is 95% of 300, which was my MAP, if you remember back from that video and the analysis of the data at the end. And then just another bike on the weekend just to keep things ticking along. But realistically, if I'm going to then, you can see previous week, I had a rest day. If I do want a rest day and feel like I need it while I get this good routine happening, the first session to go is going to be one of those easy bike sessions. Because running is, if you want to be a better runner, you need to run. If you want to be a better cyclist, you need to obviously be on the bike. So in my circumstance, my primary focus is on the running side of things. So if there's any session I'm going to drop in the week, it's probably going to be one of those easy zone 2 bikes on Zwift that say 40 minutes, 30 minutes. It's not going to be a make or break in terms of my long-term plan. It is kind of one of those extras that I'm adding in at the moment just to develop a little bit further aerobic capacity to be able to handle some increased training load as it comes. Later down the track where it is more running focused, games start to come back for me, and match days and things like that, where I'm not going to do as much cycling, my body's going to be used to that total training load. So that's really what it is. But like I said, if I do need a rest day, that's the first one to go. I'm not going to sacrifice my strength sessions, and I'm not going to sacrifice my running sessions. They're the keys to my total performance. The bike is really an added bonus for now. And as the season does go on, I tend to bring that back and cut back on the bike just to allow myself to have more recovery time overall. So hopefully you can see a bit of a similar pattern week to week. There's nothing too crazy here. And what I sort of want to highlight with this, and the last point I'm going to touch on, is that there doesn't need to be anything super fancy with some of your programming overall. Basically, I've got a really similar structure week to week. It's going to set some good habitual foundations. We're just trying to nail the basics really well. That's going to lead to the best outcome, particularly so early in the off season. Getting the stuff on screen here super specific isn't really needed. Like you would build up for a marathon or an Ironman, you get the general adaptations done out of the way first, build up your overall capacities, get as fit as you can generally, and then you start to refine the closer you get to when you have to compete or perform. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to build everything up as it is at the beginning. So it doesn't need to be complex. It just needs to be really simple, nail the basics, and that's what's going to get me through the majority of this beginning part of the program. So that's where I'm going to leave it for this first one. Hopefully you got a bit of an insight in terms of what I'm doing, and hopefully you're going to enjoy this new series that we're going to be covering over the next little while. Like I said earlier, fortnightly, weekly. Let me know in the comments what you think down below, but I'm going to try and get these out quite regularly to keep you updated on the practical side. I think it's important that we keep the theoretical videos going like I have been doing for the most part of this channel, talking about the science behind performance and sports science and all of those different things. But I think this is going to give a bit of a taste of how I put those into practice. How do I practice them for myself? But then also, what are the thought processes I go through when it comes to programming, making decisions that ultimately I then use that same framework to apply to a number of different athlete scenarios. And as I said earlier, if you do want to get access to the monthly analysis videos where I go back, have a look at all the sessions, and basically show you exactly how I analyze someone's training program to then change it, alter it, improve it, hit the button down below that says join Team NJ Sports Science. Less than a coffee a month. It's super cheap to join up. But what it's going to do is, one, support the channel, help me reduce the amount of ads on this channel as well. I do have some capability to do that. And the more people who join, we'll be able to reduce the number of ads that you do see on these videos. But also, what it's going to do is give you access to those monthly updates where we do go back and really work all the way through the program in a little bit more detail than we're doing in these ones here. So hopefully you got a bit out of this one. Looking forward to putting this series together, and we'll see you on the next one.